let's talk about the edge test. This one is what we're going to want to use if we're doing anything along the lines of raycasts, hit scan weapons, bullet hell, or whenever we're creating a test where I don't want to know directly what's in front of something, or the idea in old video games with hit scans was if this bullet is moving so fast, it will be created, live, and die within the blink of a frame. Why even bother creating an entity and doing all that extra work when we could just do a line collision test versus the world and see where that works? So let me just talk to you in general about what that's going to look like. So once again, we can do slide, line tests. What that's going to look like. We have one line defined by the 2 points. And we have another line potentially also in another thing. This is based on line intersection tests. So in math, a line is infinitely defined by its slope and offset from origin. So if you think about it as, where's my axis here? I have this here, and I've got some line that is infinitely long. The point perpendicular to this is my offset from origin, and then my slope determined by my rise over my run type of thing. That's what the slope intersect functions are based on, the same concept. In 3D, we do the same thing with the definition of a plane. It's the distance from origin and the direction of the normal of the plane is how you define an infinite plane. Well, when we're dealing with 2D line collisions, it's the same concept, just one less dimension. First thing, so the goal is to find the point in the infinite lines where these two lines would intersect, and we can solve those equations, and I'm not going to bother going through it now. But what we want to do before we can even do that, is because it's going to have some divisions involved, is determine if these lines are parallel. If these happen to be parallel, then there is no way, shape, or form that these lines will ever intersect, so the math won't work out. And you can determine that with a simple dot product. So let's talk about the dot product. I go into a lot more with cross product and dot product in part 3 of this course. But just to, in layman's terms, because this is something that was never really quite explained to me, and I was kind of a little lost until I really dug into it myself. What does a dot product mean, and what does a cross product mean? A dot product is nothing more than how alike the two lines are. So if I were to describe this line as its point from origin, and this line as its point from origin, the dot product gives us a percentage, so from 0 to 1 in floating point space, or possibly even -1, depending on how the direction of the math is asked, how alike these are. So if they're the same line, our dot product will be 1, and if they're perpendicular, they're not alike at all, the dot product will be 0. So, or do I have that backwards? I'm dyslexic, I might have that backwards. So what we're going to do is first a dot product to determine if we're parallel. If we're parallel, then we can reject, because we will never, ever intersect. By the way, if we have our lines, by the way, described as x1, y1, x2, y2, that we actually need to do the ray, or the vector from this, so we'd actually have to subtract our 2's from our 1's to get our delta x and our delta y, and if we normalize that, then we get the normalized vector, and it has to be null normalized. I'm not going to go into the explanation any further. Let's actually just take a look at what the code looks like. So let me find the edge. Get bounding, length, from vectors, set, intersect, point of intersect. All right, let's go to this function. in shape.c. All right, so this is basically our dot product. And if we are 0, then our denominator, our parallel, they can't possibly hit return 0. Our first reject test. Then we do the line equations, finding where these two segments would intersect. And then we determine if our point of intersection is within the lifetime of our our line segments. So again, if we're defining an infinite line, but we're specifically asking for a line segment test. Let me grab a little circle there. Give me that guy. Give it a copy. So I've got some infinite line. Paste. So if I have, go back to 100%, or fit. All right. So if these are my line segments, so from this point to that point, this point to this point, the line intersection test will determine that the point of collision happens to be here. The problem is, although it exists on this line segment, it does not exist in this line segment, and that's what our additional tests are for determining. That's what the line intersection test determines. And I did mention how once you have a line intersection test, the rest of the polygons work. Well, what we end up doing is if I have a line intersection test, and I want to test that against any given polygon, well, all I have to do is do the line intersection test for this line and each of the lines making up the polygon. And I can determine if I intersect something like that. If I want a point test inside any given polygon, then what I need to do is take this reference point, put it in, wherever it happens to be. What I'll end up doing is taking a line segment off of that and drawing it in an infinite direction. We're just putting it to a very, very large number that'll be outside the scope of our polygon test. And what I end up doing is counting the number of intersections. If the number of intersections so for each line segment inside my polygon, I will do the line intersection test. For each one that I collide with, I keep track of that. And if the number is odd, then I'm inside my polygon. So if I'm inside, I'll cross 1, 2, and 3, or 1, or that's still 3, or 1. If I'm outside, it will be an even number. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It gets weird at the intersection points because that can screw it with it. For instance, if I did that one, do I count that as 1 or do I count that as 2? So you'll end up probably needing to test to see if you're hitting a intersection point and then just pick a different line. No, that's even worse. Or do a couple samples and then just accept error at some point. But that's how you do every possible collision. Okay, that's all the different collision tests that we can detect in the game, at least in 2D space. I'm going to end this video here, and then we're going to do even more optimizations, or how we're actually going to use it. So, finish the recording.